Disneyland is often touted as the happiest place on earth, and for good reason. Earlier in 2024, I had the chance to take my family to Disneyland in Hong Kong. We spent a few days and really soaked up this world of magic that they create, both at the hotel and in Disneyland itself. Now, before we dive into lots around their thoughts on how they bring the magic to life, how they employ and build their staff to create such magic, I wanted to take a slightly different angle first. It's a question that I've asked myself many times, which is, do we really need to have magic at all? Isn't it just fooling us? What is this idea of magic and why is it so important? So, in this episode, I want to share with you a conversation with a man who believes we do need to have magic, especially when times are tough. With me today, I'll be interviewing James Thomas, co-founder of a beautiful charity called Feel the Magic. This charity is dedicated to supporting children and families who are going through grief, going through loss, and going through the challenges when a family member passes away. And I'm going to let James share more about the origins of the charity and why they do what they do. But I met James through a charity incubator many years ago, and I've been so impressed by the way this organization has grown and flourished and helped so many children and families along the way. So after experiencing the magic of Disneyland, I thought it'd be worth chatting to James and hearing about his amazing charity and how empathy and magic play a beautiful role in supporting children through some of the toughest times they'll ever face. This is Leading with Empathy. Welcome to this beautiful episode with James Thomas. James, welcome, mate. Thanks for making the time. Really great to be able to spend some time chatting with you again. It's been a little while, and good to have you on the Leading with Empathy podcast. I wanted to start off with you just maybe sharing a bit about the beginnings of Feel the Magic. I know you and your beautiful wife, Christy, brought this to life a little while back. So maybe just tell me why and how it all started.
For sure. Thanks for having me, Daniel. It's an honor to be here. It's been a while since I've spoken about Feel the Magic, to be honest with you. But where do I start? It's I guess the short of the long would be in 2011. I lost my mum unexpectedly on my 31st birthday, and prior to that, lost my dad when I was 25. And only child, bit of a not a rat bag. It's probably a bit harsh of me to say that about myself, but just had no direction in life. Just a young guy living his life. Had a signwriting business, and that's all I did. Worked and played hard, and that was life. And it wasn't until I lost my parents that I realized that my life had no real meaning. And a little bit of my wife's background. My wife lost her brother to leukemia when they were kids, when she was, I think, 3 or 4, and Corey was 8. So as you can imagine, tragic for that family and something that she's lived with every day of her life since she was young. So I guess together we realized at the time, especially with myself grieving the loss of my mum, I didn't know how to grieve. I just avoided it. I tried to work. I tried to drink it away. I tried to just not talk about it. And that lasted 2 years. And that was a very unhealthy way to grieve. And then I guess a few stern conversations from my wife, I started to realize that I needed to do something about it. Sold the business and went on a trip to, which I'm sure we'll get into later, but I went on a trip to America, and Disneyland was on that itinerary. And I guess you could say the rest is history. It's just from that freedom of allowing myself to break the mold, face my grief head on, and allow myself just to feel happiness once again, allowed me to really pave a way to not only support others by developing further magic, but it helped me heal. And that was a key component.
Yeah, so I mean, I love the humility of, I went over to Disneyland, all of a sudden a whole charity comes together, and I know there's a whole bunch of steps in between the two, but I'm interested in that little journey you had though of how, because grief can be very personal, right? It can be really challenging, incredibly personal, and I know it can be one of those things that other people find it hard to talk to someone who's going through that. What do you say? How do you interact with the person? What are some of the, I guess, what were some of the things that you took away from that experience that helped you through that grief for your part of the journey?
Yeah, can I actually share my most recent grief experience and compare the
Yeah,
two? We
yeah,
got time for
sure.
that? So sadly, on Christmas Eve, I lost my best mate, my little Chihuahua Joey, and I had him for 8 years. And that, honestly, Daniel, I cried for 9 days straight. I miss that guy dearly. He was just he was with me at every single time. I've got my little Princess Geordie here. She's right next, so she's walking around the house with no companion. But the reason why I'm sharing that is he was taken unexpectedly. Something bit him or something stung him, and he had an anaphylactic reaction. But that whole grief feeling and grief experience, it was almost like you got to practice what you preach. So with my death of my father, I just got on with it. With mum, I tried to get on with it, and I couldn't. I was miserable for 2 years and running and going around in circles. When I lost my dog, I cried more for my dog than I did my own parents, and that's because I knew the healthy way to grieve, and it was bloody hard. It was honestly the 9 days of my 2 week holiday was just crying and moping around the house. And I honestly believe grief is the worst pain you can go through. It truly is, in my humble opinion. It there's moments I didn't want to be in my own skin. So I guess I'm comparing three versions of my grief experience, but I guess the consistency around it is just be with that person. So Christy, knowing full well what to do, she was just by my side. My boys were by my side. With my mum, I got real healing around anyone that was willing to listen to what I was going through. So talking about it, being by that person's side. And with dad, that was a classic example of what not to do. That was just funeral's over, get on with it, and let's get going. So I guess there's three different examples of my grief journey, and the one that hurt the most, sorry, the one that I would say hurt the most, but for the shortest period of time because I grieved in a healthy way was my dog. I grieved in a terrible way with my mum, and that prolonged the pain and the suffering. And with dad, it was almost like I don't know. I guess I just put a band-aid over that wound.
Yeah,
So in a nutshell, I guess if if it was a mate of mine or it was you or whoever it was, I'd just be by that person's side. You don't really have to say too much to someone who's grieving. Just be with them.
yeah.
And it's that loneliness that can drive you insane because you don't want to be in your own skin in that moment because it's bloody painful.
Yeah, and I can imagine, just thinking about that, you've sort of had these three experiences, and you thought about it deeply, and you spent a lot of time, in this sort of grief recovery space and developing an understanding of it, and the people, a lot of the kids that helped through this process, this is
Yeah.
their first time. They're mentally and emotionally quite immature. They're only quite young, and they dumped into a pretty tough situation. So tell
Yeah.
me what are some of the approaches that is it the same thing for the young kids, the same sort of idea? What are some of the things that inspired you to start the Feel the Magic in the way that it sort of started?
Yeah, I feel like connection is a huge thing, not only just for grieving kids, but those with a similar disability or those from the same country or whatever it may be. When you connect with someone with a similar trait or a similar misfortune, you kind of connected on a different level that you are to someone who has no idea what you're going through. So
Mhm.
the idea of Camp Magic was to bring the kids together to really heal in a safe environment, but also have them absolutely understand that they're not alone in this process. Because when you are grieving, you honestly feel like, again, with my dog, I felt like I was the only bloke grieving his dog on Christmas Eve and the 9 days after. However,
Mhm.
there's thousands of people out there that have lost a dog. So it's just that realization, oh yeah, what has happened to me is horrible, and I wish it was different, but it is life and it is a fact of life, and we're all gonna die at some stage. Unfortunately for these kids, unfortunately for these kids, it happens way too soon. But fortunately, they're still young enough to, change their way of thinking around this, and they've got the opportunity to understand that they don't have to suffer or punish themselves or blame themselves or whatever it may be for the rest of their life.
Yeah, I think it's a really important piece, right? Because for a lot of us in lots of situations, when we're going through challenges, natural response, I think for me, and I'm sure for many other people, is to sort of shrink back in, to
Yeah.
pull away, to think I've got to bunker down and try and work through this together. And you're right, you sort of you feel very lonely and almost isolate yourself at the same time.
Yeah.
And I think that's the beauty of how do you find that connection. Is this? I guess that's one of the interesting things with the camps that the Feel the Magic run and the way they set up is having lots of kids who are going through that similar situation and mentors and lots of different types of people around them. Do you find that all those different stories really help to create not I don't want to say normality, but just a bit more of an ease of which they can accept and start to work through that process?
Yeah. So you're creating I guess, a community outside their own community. I think you're a father as well. You need to have a community around you, around your children. And in this modern age, that's difficult to do. So add grief into the mix, then that's a huge piece of their puzzle missing, right? It's a huge piece of their community missing. So when they come to Feel the Magic, or even part of all of our programs, they're a part of a wider community that get it. And I think that's, again, just trying to normalize it as much as possible. When you join a gym or an art class or whatever it may be, you're there for a similar purpose. You're there to learn and grow, but you're also doing it with other fellow um, other fellow community members that are around the same age, right? So
Yeah.
it's a real sense of community. And it's not just a place they come together and go, hi, I'm I'm James, I lost my dad. Who are you? There's a real education piece around emotional literacy, the tools needed, age appropriate tools needed to allow them to identify where they're at, and strategies to de-escalate if they need de-escalating, or even, be aware of when they need to reach out to someone, whether it's a parent, sibling, or someone at Feel the Magic.
Yeah, and I think that's a really if you think about the skills we teach kids at school, English, maths, science, you go down the
Yeah,
list. There's never anything around emotional literacy, around
yeah,
how to manage yourself in states of crisis and how
yeah,
to deal with these sorts of challenging situations, how to talk to other people, and probably an important one is how to ask for help when you're in that sort of state.
yeah,
And so the camps sort of wrap that message around, or that learning around, which is really powerful as well. I want to sort of link it back. So, what's the other aspect though that brings the magic, I guess, to life? What are some of the things that relate back to that Disneyland experience for you?
yeah. It you can't help but smile when you say Disneyland. You've been there recently with your
Yeah,
family, and I think for me, Daniel, it was one I didn't even want to go, to be honest with you. I didn't want to go. We're having such a great time in the States at the time. This is 2012. And then my wife said, no, we're definitely going. I wanted to do this for a long time. So okay, let's just do it. But there was just this moment of walking through the front gates, and you were like, oh wow, there's that character that I remembered as a kid, or there's that song, or there's that tune, or there's that cartoon I remember watching with my parents. And it was like, for me, it was, you know, losing mum, trying to push through. 2 years later, sold my business, and I was free and I was unemployed. I was for the first time in my life, I was unemployed, and I was just in this place, and it was such a foreign, how can I say it, foreign position to be in for me, because I've always been busy. So here I was on the other side of the world, free, in the happiest place on earth, and it just opened up so many childhood memories for myself personally. But it was if you looked around you, you could just feel the happiness. Probably not at 3 or 4 in the afternoon when all the younger kids are losing the plot because they're just overtired, but just the happiness that Disney has the ability to bring,
Mm.
and it just taps into that inner child, that inner magic that we all do have, right? But we somehow become adults, and I think school's got a big part to do with it. We all, we're also got to do this, got to do that, and the world we live in today, it's such a different place
Mm.
as to when we were kids, right? So Disneyland brings that element of magic that you just think. Well, at the time for me, I thought I'm in the right place at the right time, and thankfully that was true, because I did come up with Feel the Magic.
And I think that, when you came up with it and the idea, it's this beautiful combination. And I think this is something that, I hope people will take away when you're talking with someone who's going through a grief situation or going through a challenging, stressful time. at one end you can see really trying to sympathize and sit with them and tell them how sorry you are, and
Yeah,
there's a model in my head that says, are we dragging ourselves? Are we dragging it down into that sadness?
yeah,
At the other end of the spectrum, there's a don't worry about it. Let me, trick you or or take your mind off it with all this sparkly stuff and
yeah,
pretend it doesn't exist. And as we know, on the other side of that is still the grief still there. And I think what you've built is trying to do both
yeah,
together.
yeah. So to give a bit of context, so originally, Feel the Magic, it was simply just a hey, let's try raise money to support grieving kids and their families and take them to the happiest place on earth. So we would just raise a bit of money and send. I think we sent about 12 families all up. But I guess the magic that come from that, apart from being in Disneyland, was the connection that these families had with one another. So it wasn't our intention, but those families come together and really, they were catching up for birthdays or barbecues, or kids were catching up and really, really connecting. So they're forming their own community from all over the country. And so it was from there that we decided, no, this we need to do more than send them to Disneyland. Disneyland's great, but more bang for buck, more bang for the donated dollar. That's where we developed Camp Magic, because we realized that schools, as you said, schools aren't teaching the emotional literacy aspect. And it's interesting with grieving kids, 1 in 20 Australian kids will lose a parent by the time they're 18. So if you average that out, it's probably one child in every classroom. So one child in every classroom is sitting there trying to get on with their life, potentially with receiving no support on what they're actually going through. And
Yeah.
then we wonder why we wonder why the mental health statistics or drug addiction statistics are through the roof. So it's one of those things we realized that we could make a difference, and a greater difference by having more kids in the same place at the same time, mentored by coincidence. A lot of mentors have come on board who have lost themselves. But I will reiterate, you don't need to have lost to be a great mentor.
Yeah, and look, my wife has been a mentor. She did lose her mum when she was very young,
Yeah.
and she's um, probably knows that experience, that lifelong experience of dealing with grief in her situation, and even the thought that plays on her mind that our daughter's now the age that she was when she lost her
Oh,
mum,
wow.
and
Wow.
working, thinking that through and seeing her. So it's one of those things that and you probably would reiterate this. It's not something that leaves you. It's not something. Grief isn't a wound that's going to be fixed and it's going to go away. It's something you will carry.
Yeah.
But I want to touch on the mentors because from her experience, when you're thinking about mentoring, and I'd really recommend people to do this if they have the opportunity, mentoring at a camp, I think mentors go there sometimes thinking, I'm there to give, but
Yeah.
actually they get a lot out of it. I wonder, what have you seen that those changes be in the mentors who've gone along and spent time with the kids?
Oh, it's been huge. So we turned 10 years old last year, the organization, which is we're really, really proud of. But in that 10 years, I've seen, apprenticeships being handed out by mentor to camper. I've seen business partnerships come together. I've seen mentors and mentors, working with one another. I've seen kids come back and be mentors. But ultimately, the mentor comes along thinking, yes, like you say, I'm going to make a difference to this child's life. But it, again, in my wife and in my opinion, we believe that grieving kids are the most strongest, resilient kids that are out there. When you say that your wife lost her mother when she was your daughter's age, and your daughter's tiny, you know what I mean? So that really puts it into perspective to go, wow, how is a child that little ever meant to get over that? And you don't get over it. You just carry that wound with you. So with mentoring, you can mentor, and you've got to take a step back. You've got to you mentor, and that's it, right? You move on, and there are ways you can connect with the family. That's for another story. But the difference that you can make in a little child's life that will sit with them forever is profound. And that there, knowing you've made a difference, a long-term difference, is huge. It's quite substantial. It's yeah, it's hard to put into words, because once you have magical feeling of knowing you've made a difference to that child, a child who didn't want to be there, or a child who couldn't look you in the eyes, or a child that couldn't even talk about their mum or dad or even say their name, to the point where they're hugging you and saying, thank you so much. Can't wait till next time. That's you can't put a dollar value on that. So it's just a real life experience.
Yeah, and it is an emotional roller coaster, right? I mean, I've
Yeah.
seen some of the videos of the kids talking about their
Yeah.
parents, and my wife had received a Christmas card over the
Nice.
holidays from her mentee, and you're right, they form a connection, and
Yeah.
I want to sort of maybe take a little step sideways on that, and how has that experience, I guess, changed and shaped you as a person in terms of the relationships, the connections, the way you view, you sort of tongue in cheek, you're a bit of a rat bag, self admitted. Has this experience of going through these processes of grief and setting up this charity, has it shaped the way you think about your own relationships and your own life?
Yeah, it has. It has. But it's again, coming back to my dog Joey, once again, it's a wake up call in life, because you do take it for granted. You do forget, you do forget the pain and all that sort of stuff and what you stand for. And then all of a sudden life can get you once again. You're like, oh, okay, here's where I need to do better. I think, the process of grief or even the process of pain, any sort of pain you're going through, or the discomfort. I think I'm far more aware now that you can't outrun discomfort or pain, or something that you can't avoid things that you need to face. And grief is one of them, and there's many other things, right? So I think learning how to grieve properly, and grieving my dog, again, it challenged me so much, because I knew I had to sit there and go through this, and I tried to think of every other way that I didn't have to. Um, but it's perspective, right? It just really and it goes to show for me that when I come out of it, the other side of it, 9 days later, feeling like I have achieved, like it's like I went to war within myself, and I come out the other side. There's a sense of, I don't know. It just feels like nothing greater than grief can truly hurt me, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
I do genuinely feel like grief is the most painful emotion we can all go through.
yeah, and
It is the ultimate price you pay for love.
absolutely, and that's the thing. It's it's a sign of caring. It's a sign of the importance that person, that dog, that
Yeah,
thing, whatever it might be, has on us, and it's something we should the old stereotypical stiff upper lip, get on with it, boys don't cry, all that sort of stuff.
yeah, it's all
Actually,
rubbish.
it does us a disservice, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's all rubbish. It's all rubbish. It's interesting. We live in a world now where, I don't know if you watch Bohemian Rhapsody and Elton John's movie, all those or what do you mean you call them, documentary biographies. They were wounded kids, and they
Mm.
just were successful, and it all stemmed from that stiff upper lip, get on with it, be tough, and that's all bullshit.
Yeah,
It doesn't work. It may work for some, but then if you really peel that onion back, they're coping in some way, shape, or form. They've got a strategy that probably isn't working for them.
yeah,
Um, I just think if you're brave enough, and you're committed to yourself enough and your loved ones, and even to the one that you've lost, you've just got to grit your teeth and go through it. And that's the
yeah.
only way. You got to. What's the saying that they come up with it? Feel the magic. You got to feel it to heal it. So, um, yeah, no other words, no other true word is spoken. I think that's a true test of your character, right? Because there's nothing more discomforting than grief.
Absolutely. A good friend of mine, Patria King, she works a lot with people who are in pretty challenging situations. And one of the things she talked to me about it years ago now, I think it might be a Buddhist idea, is that you are not your emotions. You have emotions, but
Yeah,
you're not your emotions. And there's that idea of that they wash over you. And sometimes they stay for 9 days, sometimes 9 years,
yeah,
sometimes our whole life if we don't address them. But it's that idea that I'm not broken, I'm not wounded, I'm feeling that grief, and if I can
yeah.
distinguish these things and pull them apart, it makes them much more manageable.
Yeah. I remember when my mum died. I remember, sorry, going back a few steps, even the way I was treated from the medical professionals when my mum died, I do feel like the dialogue around grief in the last 10 years has changed so much. And I like to think Feel the Magic has had something to do with that. Because when my mum died, I remember we thought she had a stroke. They ushered us into a tiny room in the hospital. And basically they said, "Oh, sit down there." And it was a dark room, it was a small room, and I was just waiting for him to come out and tell me the report, what happened. And the neurosurgeon walked in and said, "Oh, are you Mr. Thomas?" And he only looked up at me when I said yes, and he looked back at his clipboard and he said, "I'm sorry, she didn't make it," and just turned around and walked out. So it was like this. It was like someone just walked in with a grenade, threw it in the room, and thought, "You guys deal with that, and we'll walk out." So it's, I do feel like things have evolved a lot since then. Yeah, it's interesting. It's really interesting just to look back on that and just how I was treated through that, because it is a topic that you don't really want to talk about. So I think the the better thing to do now is to talk about it, and you don't really have to say too much.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny you mentioned that. I'm scheduled into one of our future episodes. I'll be talking to a couple of ED nurses
Oh wow.
around empathy because for them it's a challenging balance between
Yeah,
um, how much can you care, deeply about every single
yeah,
individual. Part of their job is this is like a piece of machinery that's broken and I need to work out how to fix it. And I've got to have it's really tough. And I think that pretty well brings back this whole idea that you don't have to be an expert to help someone through grief. You just got to
no,
be there.
yeah,
You don't have to say the right thing.
yeah,
You just have to sit with them and support them.
yeah, yeah. That's the sort of support that most people subconsciously need. If you're there trying to fix it or say the right thing, you're going to say the wrong thing, you're going to screw up. So just be comfortable within yourself, just to sit there, sit by their side, and just be with them, and they'll talk. I know with my experience when I was grieving, I just wanted to talk.
Yeah.
Some people don't want to talk, but that's it. It really, I'm trying not to oversimplify how to support someone who's grieving, because it's not that simple. But for a friend or a close loved one or whatever, whoever it may be, it is a matter of just being there. Being there is half the battle, and letting them know that it's okay to grieve. And no time frames. There's no time frames on grief.
Hmm.
I think there's moments where in life, like my both my parents died by the 2011. So I had my first child at 2018. So there was a grieving moment there where I was like, wow, mum and dad will never get to hold their grandson.
Yeah.
So, there was probably a 2 or 3 year period where I, not that I don't think about him, but I didn't have that despair feeling that grief can bring. And then the same thing happened when I had my second child, Chase. Same thing. You got, man, my parents will never be, physical grandparents, and that's sad, and that's unfortunate. That's just the way it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And the idea of going through grief, going through challenges, going through struggles, I think it's personal for everyone.
Yeah,
I did a bike ride recently and I've done plenty of them in Thailand, and we have this saying about day six. Day six it's an 8 day bike ride, and day six is sort of not close enough to the end to feel like you're almost there, too far from
yeah,
the start that you're not fatigued and you're already tired and worn out, and you have this sort of a lull moment. And
yeah,
again, that's where sitting next to someone who's riding with you, it doesn't matter if they're feeling good, bad, or indifferent, but just having that person next to you
yeah.
can help you sort of get through that challenging time.
It's community, right? So you're there for a definite purpose. You're there to make a difference, and I think again, now that I'm a dad myself, I really see how community is lacking in the Western
Yeah.
cultures. It's really, and it's difficult. It's not easy to build a community around your kids once you're established at school or whatever. That's when you start to put the right pieces in place. But families aren't as close, as connected as they once were, and you know the kids in Thailand, you've seen it yourself. They're very community orientated.
Yeah.
Whereas here, it's pretty rare. It's pretty
Yeah.
rare.
It's a big problem. And the other reason I mentioned the bike ride, of course, is one of the ways that people can support Feel the Magic is you do a bike ride, a charity bike ride, and
Yes.
that's one way. And I think when people think about charities, most people think about, oh, I've got to, oh, they're going to ask for money. But there's a whole bunch of different ways that we can support charities. You're a founder of a charity. I know that journey is very underrated. I think I've spoken to many people, James, who've said to me, "Oh, I want to start a charity," and my first question is, "Are you sure?"
Yeah, yeah.
It's a tough,
Send them my way.
it's,
Send them
it's a
my way.
tough
I'll have a chat to them. Yeah.
yeah, it's a tough road, but what are some of the ways people could support Feel the Magic? What's some of the help you need, and what can people do to get involved?
Yeah, I think how can I answer this one? The way I feel like why I feel the magic has been successful in the early days. Christy and I, my wife, we didn't have our hand out first, and then made a difference. We've always made a difference, and then if you've felt, seen, touched, made a difference, and you feel the magic, that's when we'll say, hey, contribute in any way, shape, or form, whether it's events, the magic ride, fundraise, whatever it may be. So there's many ways you can do it, but what I would say is get involved, get to understand the charity, whatever charity it is. Actually, if you want to get involved with Feel the Magic, awesome. Come and volunteer. Come to a camp. Come and just be with us, and then see what we do and see the impact that you can potentially make to a grieving child, not only just for that weekend, but for the rest of their life. And that's where it's best then to say, hey, if you want to join a magic ride, or if you want to join a night of magic or a golf day, come along and have some fun as well. So that's always been as founders, that's always been our strategy to raise money, and I feel it works. But if I'm talking to if a corporate's listening or whatever it may be, then reach out. We love to partner with genuine organisations that want to make a difference to grieving kids. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's all on our website, and yeah, you can check it out.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, we do have. I know there's a bunch of corporates people who are in my network who'll listen. I spend a lot of time in the insurance industry, and that's one area where life insurance, in particular, you're dealing with families who've lost someone often, too
Yeah,
often.
yeah,
And what do you say? How do you support them holistically? I think there's a lot they can
yeah.
learn from Feel the Magic as well, and create a
Definitely.
relationship.
We do have a help program, which we run in corporations. So, whether you have a direct colleague who's grieving the loss of a child, or a husband or a wife or whatever it may be, but it's mainly developing emotional literacy in the office place. So if any of your listeners are interested in that, we have a great facilitator, Peter Maloney, who delivers those, and he does a cracking job. And we've done it with Channel 9, we've done it with, who else we do it with? We did it with the Sydney Children's Hospital, because they're dealing with sick kids that some of them sadly don't make it. So really creating a language as a workplace, as a team, as a community, to support one another who may need it in any way, shape, or form. Because grief is grief, right? It's not it doesn't discriminate. We're all going to experience grief in some way, shape, or form throughout our life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can testify to that. We had Peter come to a workshop I ran with AIA, their life insurance claims team, and they were blown away by the real tangible skills, the practical skills. And as I said, we go back to the start. We don't learn that at school.
Yeah.
Some of us learn it from other people around us, but most of us we stumble and trip and fall
Yeah.
and work our way through it over a lifetime of challenges. And look, I really thank you, James, for coming on today. Sorry to hear about your little mate Joey, and
Yeah. Thank you.
but look, I really appreciate it. I love what you do, and it's been a real pleasure chatting to you.
No, absolute pleasure anytime. And yeah, much appreciated. And it's been a great chat. Thanks for having
Awesome.
me.
Thanks so much, James. All the
Thanks,
best.
Daniel.